Marriage, I had believed, was about weathering storms together, facing every challenge as a team. James and I had spent years building a life that seemed solid if not perfect. We weren't the fairy tale couple people romanticized, but we shared goals, dreams, and plans for a future that felt achievable. At least that's what I thought. It started subtly, like the first hints of rain before a thunderstorm. James began working late more often, citing endless meetings and last-minute deadlines. Our dinner conversations grew shorter, filled with vague mentions of stress and exhaustion. I told myself it was normal, that marriages went through phases and that his distance would pass with time. One evening, I decided to surprise him at the office. I packed his favorite dinner in a neat little container, imagining his face lighting up when he saw me. But when I arrived, his assistant looked startled. "James isn't here," she said, avoiding my gaze. "Not here? He told me he'd be working late," I replied, my stomach twisting. I think he might have stepped out," she stammered, clearly uncomfortable. I left the office feeling unsettled, brushing off my doubts as paranoia. But the seed had been planted, and it was only a matter of time before it sprouted. Over the following weeks, the signs became harder to ignore. James had always been careful with his phone, but now it seemed glued to his hand, his screen constantly angled away from me. His excuses for late nights became less convincing, and his once affectionate gestures, small things like holding my hand or kissing my forehead, became infrequent, almost mechanical. I tried to address it cautiously at first. "You've been so busy lately," I said one evening as we sat on the couch. "Is everything okay?" He glanced at me, his expression unreadable. "Just work," he said curtly, turning his attention back to his laptop. It wasn't the answer I needed, but I didn't push. Instead, I retreated into myself, trying to convince my heart that I was overreacting. The emotional distance between us grew, a quiet chasm that widened with each passing day. I found myself replaying our conversations, looking for clues, for anything that could explain the shift in his behavior. Had I done something wrong? Was I not enough? One night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, I realized how lonely I felt, even with James sleeping beside me. The breaking point came during a dinner party we hosted for a few close friends. James had been unusually charming, his laughter loud and his attention centered on everyone but me. I tried to brush it off, chalking it up to his work-related stress. But then I saw it, an exchange between him and one of the guests, a woman named Victoria. She was stunning, with perfect hair and a laugh that seemed to draw everyone's attention. James leaned in as she spoke, his eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. A pang of jealousy hit me, sharp and undeniable. I told myself it was harmless, but the feeling lingered long after the guests had left. The following weekend, James suggested we spend some time apart. "I think we could use a little space," he said casually, as though he were suggesting a minor adjustment to our routine. "Space?" I repeated, my voice trembling. "What does that mean?" "It's not permanent," he assured me. "I just think we've been tense lately and some distance might help." His words felt like a slap, but I nodded, too stunned to argue. He packed a small bag and left that evening, leaving me alone in a house that suddenly felt far too big. For days, I wandered through the house in a daze, trying to make sense of what was happening. James and I had faced challenges before, but this felt different. It felt like something was slipping away and I couldn't stop it. When I finally worked up the courage to call him, his responses were curt, his tone distant. "I just need time, Emma," he said, his voice laced with impatience. "We'll talk soon." I found myself retreating into old habits, cooking his favorite meals, tidying the house obsessively, anything to convince myself that things would return to normal. But the more I tried to hold on, the more I felt him slipping through my fingers. Late one evening, I logged onto social media, seeking some distraction from my swirling thoughts. As I scrolled mindlessly, a photo caught my eye, James and Victoria, smiling together at what looked like a luxurious event. The caption read, "Power couple at last night's gala." My heart sank as realization dawned. The work stress, the distance, the suggestion of space, it all made sense now. James hadn't been pulling away because of work. He had been pulling away because he was leaving. When the photo of James and Victoria at the gala stared back at me from my screen, my world crumbled. It wasn't just the betrayal itself. It was the realization that I had been blind to it for so long. Every late night, every vague excuse, every moment of distance had been leading to this. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred, the tears streaming down my face, a mix of rage, heartbreak, and humiliation. How could he? How could he look so happy with her while I was at home, desperately trying to hold us together? The next morning I confronted him. My hands trembled as I dialed his number, the ringing feeling like a countdown to an explosion I wasn't ready for. When he picked up, his voice was as calm and detached as ever. "Emma, I'm in the middle of something," he said, his tone clipped. "Middle of what, James?" I shot back, my voice shaking. "Another gala with Victoria?" The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally he sighed. "Emma, I didn't want you to find out like this." "Find out what?" I spat, my anger boiling over. "That you've been lying to me? That you've been seeing someone else? That you've been humiliating me while I've been here trying to save our marriage?" "It's not like that," he said weakly. "Then what is it like?" I demanded. "Explain it to me, James, because from where I'm standing, it looks like you left me for her." When he finally spoke, his words cut deeper than I thought possible. "Victoria and we connect in ways you and I never did. She understands me, Emma. She supports me in a way you just don't." The air left my lungs as his words sank in. "Supports you?" I echoed. "I sacrificed everything for you, James. I put my dreams on hold to help you chase yours. How dare you say I didn't support you?" He didn't respond, and the silence was louder than any argument we could have had. A few days later he came by the house to collect some of his things. I watched from the kitchen as he moved through the space we had once shared, now a stranger in the place we had called home. "I didn't want it to end like this," he said, standing in the doorway with his suitcase in hand. "Then maybe you shouldn't have cheated on me," I replied coldly. His expression faltered, but he didn't argue. "I hope one day you'll understand why I had to do this." I laughed bitterly. "Understand? You want me to understand how you threw away years of marriage for someone you barely know? You want me to understand how you left me for someone with more money and influence?" He looked away, guilt flickering across his face. "It's not just about that." "Of course it is," I said. "Victoria is rich, isn't she? She can give you the lifestyle you've always wanted. Just admit it, James. You didn't choose her because you love her. You chose her because of what she can give you." As he left, I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions: anger, heartbreak, and most of all, shame. Shame that I hadn't seen the signs sooner. Shame that I had let myself believe in a man who was willing to trade loyalty for luxury. I spent the following days in a haze, barely able to function. Friends and family reached out, their voices filled with concern, but I couldn't bring myself to answer their calls. How could I explain what had happened? How could I admit that my husband had abandoned me for someone else? Someone richer, more glamorous, more suitable for his ambitions. One evening, Clara showed up at my door, her arms full of groceries and her eyes full of determination. "I'm not leaving until you let me in," she said, her voice firm. Reluctantly, I stepped aside and she busied herself in the kitchen, cooking dinner and forcing me to eat. "Emma, you can't let him do this to you," she said as we sat at the table. "You're better than this. You're better than him." Her words were kind, but they didn't erase the hollow ache in my chest. "I don't know who I am without him," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're Emma," she said fiercely. "You're smart, talented, and capable. And you're going to prove to everyone, including James, that you don't need him to shine." Clara's words planted a seed of determination in me, though it would take time for it to grow. For now, I was still lost in the pain, the betrayal, and the overwhelming task of figuring out how to move forward. But deep down, a small part of me knew she was right. James had underestimated me, and one day I would show him and myself just how wrong he was. The days after James left felt like I was moving through a fog. Everything I had built my life around was gone. The routines, the shared dreams, the sense of stability. Even the house felt like a stranger's, filled with echoes of memories I didn't want to face. I tried to keep busy, but every corner of my life seemed to remind me of him. The coffee mugs we had chosen together, the playlist we used to listen to on lazy Sundays, even the faint scent of his cologne that still lingered in the closet. At work, I was barely functioning. My boss, Mr. Carrington, was kind but firm. "Emma, I can see you're struggling, but I need you to focus. Take some time if you need it, but don't let this situation ruin everything you've worked for." His words stung not because they were harsh but because they were true. I had let James's betrayal seep into every corner of my life, and it was beginning to consume me. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, the TV playing some mindless show I wasn't paying attention to. I found myself scrolling through social media. That's when I saw it. A photo of James and Victoria at a charity gala. She was draped in a glittering gown, her arm looped through his, both of them smiling as though they didn't have a care in the world. My stomach twisted in knots. How could they look so happy while I was falling apart? How could James move on so easily when I was barely holding myself together? I threw my phone onto the couch and buried my face in my hands, tears streaming down my face. The ache in my chest felt unbearable, like a weight pressing down on me, crushing me from the inside out. Clara, ever the loyal friend, showed up unannounced the next day. "You're not answering my calls, so I figured I'd force my way in," she said, holding up a bag of takeout. I tried to muster a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. "I'm fine, Clara." She raised an eyebrow. "Emma, you're sitting here in sweatpants and a t-shirt that's older than your marriage. You're not fine." She sat beside me, opening the bag and handing me a container. "You're allowed to feel this way," she said gently. "But you can't let it consume you. He doesn't deserve that power over you." Her words stuck with me long after she left. I didn't want James to have power over me anymore. I didn't want to spend another sleepless night wondering why I wasn't enough, why he had chosen someone else. Despite my best efforts, the world around me felt relentless in its reminders of what I had lost. Friends reached out, offering their sympathy, but their well-meaning words only made me feel more isolated. "You're so much better off without him," they'd say, as though it was supposed to make the pain disappear. But I didn't feel better off. I felt abandoned, humiliated, and empty. The turning point came one night when I hit rock bottom. I was sitting on the bathroom floor, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were puffy from crying, my hair a mess, my cheeks hollow from barely eating. "What are you doing to yourself?" I whispered, the sound of my own voice startling me. For the first time in weeks, I saw myself clearly, not as James's discarded wife, but as someone who deserved better. Someone who deserved happiness, even if I didn't know how to find it yet. The next morning I made a decision. I couldn't change what James had done, but I could choose how I responded. I could either let his betrayal define me, or I could take back control of my life. I started small, getting out of bed at a reasonable hour, eating proper meals, and going for walks to clear my head. Each step felt monumental, like I was climbing out of a deep, dark pit 1 inch at a time. Clara noticed the change almost immediately. "You're looking better," she said over coffee one afternoon. "It's like the light's coming back into your eyes." "It's a start," I admitted. "But I'm not there yet." "And that's okay," she replied. "You don't have to be there yet. Just keep moving forward." Her encouragement gave me the push I needed to keep going. Slowly but surely I began to rebuild, not just my routines but my sense of self. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of it all felt overwhelming, when I wanted to crawl back into bed and hide from the world. But I reminded myself of the promise I had made, to take back my life one step at a time. Little did I know this journey would lead me to discover a strength I never knew I had, and a success that would make James realize exactly what he had lost. As the fog of heartbreak began to lift, I realized something profound. My life didn't have to revolve around James's betrayal. He had taken enough from me, my confidence, my happiness, my sense of security, but I refused to let him take my future. It was time to rebuild, not for anyone else but for myself. The first step was rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. For years, I had poured so much of myself into supporting James and his dreams that I had forgotten my own. What were my passions? What had I given up in the name of compromise? One afternoon, while cleaning out the spare room, I stumbled upon a box filled with old sketchbooks and art supplies. Memories of late nights spent drawing as a teenager flooded back to me, and I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time: inspiration. I set up a small workspace in the corner of the room, dusting off my pencils and sketch pads. At first, my lines were shaky, my confidence faltering. But as the days turned into weeks, my skills returned, and with them a sense of purpose. Art became my refuge. It gave me a way to process my emotions, to channel my pain into something tangible. I spent hours lost in my work, the world fading away as I poured my heart onto the canvas. Clara, ever my cheerleader, was thrilled when she saw my progress. "Emma, these are incredible," she said, holding up one of my pieces. "You should show these to someone." I laughed, shaking my head. "They're just for me. I'm not ready for anyone else to see them." But her words planted a seed of possibility. What if my art could be more than just a hobby? Beyond my creative pursuits, I also began focusing on my physical and mental health. I joined a local gym not to chase some unrealistic ideal, but to feel stronger and more in control of my body. The act of moving, of pushing myself, became another way to reclaim my power. Yoga classes became a favorite of mine, offering a quiet space to connect with my thoughts and emotions. My instructor, a serene woman named Maya, often spoke about the importance of balance, not just in poses but in life. Pain can be a teacher, she said during one session. It shows us what we're capable of enduring and what we need to let go of. Her words resonated deeply, and I began to see my pain not as a burden, but as a stepping stone to growth. I also sought professional help, starting therapy for the first time in my life. My therapist, Dr. Harper, was patient and compassionate, guiding me through the tangled emotions I had buried for so long. "Emma, your pain is valid," she told me during one session. "But it doesn't define you. You're more than what happened to you." Her words became a mantra for me, a reminder that I was capable of more than I had ever believed. As I rebuilt my life, I started reconnecting with people who had been pushed aside during my marriage. Old friends welcomed me back with open arms, their laughter and support reminding me of the person I used to be. I also made new connections, joining a local art group where I met others who shared my passion for creativity. Their encouragement and camaraderie gave me a sense of belonging that I hadn't realized I was missing. The turning point came when I decided to take a leap of faith and submit one of my pieces to a local gallery's open call for artists. Clara practically dragged me to the submission event, her enthusiasm outweighing my nerves. "I don't know if it's good enough," I said, clutching the canvas tightly. "Emma, it's more than good enough," she said firmly. "You need to believe in yourself as much as I do." Her faith in me was infectious, and I handed over my piece with trembling hands. A few weeks later, I received an email that left me speechless. My piece had been accepted. It would be part of an upcoming exhibition, alongside works from seasoned artists. When I told Clara, she screamed so loudly I thought the neighbors might call the police. "Emma, this is huge," she said, practically bouncing with excitement. "It's just one piece," I said modestly. "It's the first step," she corrected. "And it's only the beginning." Preparing for the exhibition became my focus, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly excited about something. The pain of James's betrayal was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I was rediscovering myself, my passions, my strengths, my voice, and it felt incredible. The woman who had once been defined by her husband's ambitions was now carving out her own path, one brushstroke at a time. Little did I know, this path would not only lead to professional success but also to a personal transformation that would leave James and Victoria stunned when our worlds collided again. The acceptance of my art into the local gallery was a turning point, a spark that ignited a fire within me. For years, I had lived in the shadows of James's ambitions, sidelining my own dreams to support his. But now I was finally stepping into my own light. Preparing for the exhibition was both thrilling and nerve-wracking. I poured myself into my work, creating additional pieces to accompany the one that had been accepted. Each painting told a story of heartbreak, resilience, and transformation. They were deeply personal, and as I worked late into the nights, I felt a sense of catharsis that had been missing for so long. Clara was my biggest cheerleader, stopping by regularly to check on my progress. "Emma, these are incredible," she said one evening, admiring a piece that depicted a phoenix rising from the ashes. "It's like you're putting your whole heart into them." "I guess I am," I admitted, stepping back to look at the painting. It's the first time in a long time that I've felt free. The night of the exhibition arrived, and I stood in the gallery, surrounded by my work and a crowd of strangers. My heart raced as people wandered from piece to piece, their murmured comments filling the room. I had never felt so exposed yet so proud. One woman stopped in front of the phoenix painting, her eyes widening. "This is stunning," she said, turning to me. "You're the artist, aren't you?" I nodded, my cheeks flushing. "Yes, I am." "It's so powerful," she continued. "It feels like it's telling a story of transformation. Like someone finding their strength after being broken." Her words brought tears to my eyes. She didn't know my story, but she had seen it in my work. The exhibition was a success, and the feedback I received was overwhelmingly positive. Several pieces sold that night, and I was approached by other gallery owners who were interested in featuring my work. Clara couldn't stop grinning as we celebrated with champagne afterward. "Emma, this is just the beginning," she said, raising her glass. "You're going to go so far, I just know it." Her belief in me was infectious, and for the first time in years I began to believe it too. As my art career blossomed, so did my confidence. Opportunities began to flow in: commissions, collaborations, and invitations to participate in larger exhibitions. Each success felt like a step further away from the shadow James had cast over my life. But success wasn't just about recognition or financial stability, it was about rediscovering myself. My art had become a reflection of my journey, and with each piece I created, I felt more connected to who I truly was. One day, as I worked in my studio, I received a call from an organization that supported women in the arts. They had seen my work and wanted me to lead a workshop for aspiring female artists. The idea of teaching terrified me, but Clara's voice echoed in my mind, "You're stronger than you think, Emma." I agreed, and the experience was transformative. Seeing young women light up as they explored their creativity reminded me of why I had fallen in love with art in the first place. As my professional life flourished, my personal life began to follow suit. I surrounded myself with people who supported and uplifted me, creating a circle of friends who celebrated my successes as if they were their own. Among them was Lucas, a fellow artist I had met at a gallery event. He was kind, encouraging, and genuinely interested in my work and my story. Over time, our friendship deepened, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone since James. "You've been through so much, Emma," he said one evening as we shared a quiet dinner. "But you've come out of it stronger, more incredible than ever." His words touched something deep within me, a sense of being truly seen and valued for who I was. "Thank you," I said softly, meeting his gaze. "That means more than you know." As my life flourished, I began to hear whispers of James and Victoria's struggles. The perfect image they had presented to the world was beginning to crack, and while I didn't seek out details, they inevitably found their way to me. "Did you hear about James?" Clara asked one day over coffee. "Apparently his business is struggling." "And Victoria?" "Word is she's not as supportive as she seemed." I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was fleeting. Their downfall wasn't my concern anymore. My focus was on the life I was building, one that was stronger and brighter than anything I could have imagined. As my career reached new heights and my confidence grew, I found myself open to something I hadn't dared to consider in a long time: love. It wasn't that I was actively seeking it, but rather that I had finally healed enough to make space for it. And it was Lucas, with his quiet strength and unshakable kindness, who became the unexpected light in my life. Our friendship had blossomed naturally, built on shared interests and mutual respect. Lucas was an artist too, his work vibrant and full of life, a reflection of his optimistic spirit. He had a way of making everyone around him feel at ease, and his encouragement had been instrumental in helping me find my footing in the art world. One evening, after a gallery opening, we found ourselves walking through the city together. The streets were quiet, the soft glow of streetlights casting a warm ambience. "You've been doing incredible things, Emma," Lucas said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "It's inspiring to watch you thrive." I smiled, the compliment touching me deeply. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without people like you and Clara supporting me." "You're giving yourself too little credit," he replied. "You're the one who took the leap, who faced everything head-on. That takes courage." As our conversations deepened, so did my feelings for him. Lucas had a way of listening that made me feel truly seen and valued, something I hadn't realized I'd been missing until I found it. One evening, as we sat on a park bench overlooking the city skyline, he turned to me with a soft smile. "Emma, I want to ask you something, but I don't want to overstep." "Go ahead," I said, curious. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "Would you ever consider letting someone in again? Not because you need them, but because you want them." The question caught me off guard, but it also made me realize how far I'd come. "I think I'm finally ready," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. His smile widened, and in that moment I knew he wasn't just a friend, he was someone who could help me build a new chapter in my life. Our relationship unfolded slowly, organically, and without the weight of expectations. Lucas never tried to fix me or rush me. He simply stood by my side, offering love and understanding. One day he surprised me with a trip to a quiet art retreat in the countryside. I thought you might enjoy some time to recharge, he said as we arrived at the charming cottage surrounded by rolling hills. The retreat was exactly what I needed, a chance to step away from the chaos and focus on myself and my work. We spent our days painting side by side, sharing stories and exploring the beauty of nature. During one particularly breathtaking sunset, as we sat by a tranquil lake, Lucas reached for my hand. "Emma, I need you to know something," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "What is it?" I asked, my heart fluttering. "I admire you, not just for your talent but for your strength, your resilience and your heart. You've been through so much, and yet you've come out of it more extraordinary than ever." Tears welled in my eyes as his words sank in. "Lucas, thank you. That means more than I can say." In that moment I realized I was ready to let love back into my life. Not as a crutch but as a partnership built on mutual respect and shared dreams. As our relationship deepened, Lucas became an integral part of my journey. He wasn't just my partner, he was my biggest supporter, encouraging me to keep pushing forward and reminding me of my worth. With him I felt safe, valued and loved in a way I never had before. He saw me for who I truly was, not as James's ex-wife or a woman defined by betrayal, but as Emma, an artist, a fighter and someone worthy of happiness. Meanwhile, whispers of James and Victoria's struggles continued to reach me. Their once perfect relationship had begun to crumble under the weight of their choices, and James's financial troubles were becoming more apparent. Clara relayed the latest news one afternoon. "Did you hear? Victoria's family pulled their support for James's projects. Apparently they think he's too much of a liability." I felt a flicker of satisfaction but quickly pushed it aside. Their downfall wasn't my concern anymore. My focus was on the life I was building with Lucas. A life filled with love, creativity and purpose. As I stood in my studio one evening working on a new piece, I realized how far I had come. James had once been the center of my world, but now he was nothing more than a distant memory. The pain he caused had been the catalyst for my transformation, and for that I was almost grateful. With Lucas by my side and a future filled with possibilities, I knew I was finally where I was meant to be. As my life flourished with love, creativity and purpose, news of James's downfall began to spread. It wasn't something I actively sought out, but the whispers found their way to me through mutual acquaintances and occasionally the headlines of local business publications. The man who had once left me for the allure of wealth and influence was now reaping the consequences of his choices. It started with his business ventures. James had always prided himself on being a savvy entrepreneur, but without Victoria's financial backing and her family's influential connections, his empire began to crumble. Contracts were cancelled, investors pulled out, and his reputation, once untouchable, was now tarnished by whispers of failure and incompetence. Clara, who never missed an opportunity to keep me updated, called one afternoon with the latest news. "Did you hear about James?" she asked, her voice brimming with barely contained schadenfreude. "No," I said cautiously. "What happened?" "He's bankrupt," she said bluntly. Apparently Victoria's family pulled all their support after some bad investments. And guess what? She left him. The words hung in the air, a mix of vindication and disbelief washing over me. "She left him." I repeated. "Oh yeah," Claire continued. "Turns out she wasn't as loyal as he thought. When the money dried up, so did her interest in him." Hearing about Victoria's departure stirred a strange mix of emotions in me. Part of me felt satisfaction. James had left me for a life he thought was better, only to lose it all. But another part of me felt a twinge of pity. He had built his world on shallow foundations and now it was collapsing around him. One evening, as Lucas and I shared dinner at a cozy bistro, he noticed my distracted expression. "What's on your mind?" he asked, his warm hazel eyes filled with concern. "James," I admitted. "I heard he's lost everything. Victoria left him." Lucas reached across the table, taking my hand in his. "How do you feel about that?" I thought for a moment before answering. "I don't feel as much as I thought I would. A year ago I would have celebrated his downfall. Now I just feel indifferent." "That's a good sign," Lucas said with a small smile. "It means you've truly moved on." Despite my indifference, James's name kept appearing in conversations and articles. One day I stumbled across a post on social media. A photo of him looking disheveled and weary sitting alone at a cafe. The caption read, "Former business mogul hits rock bottom." I stared at the photo for a long time, wondering how someone who had once been so confident and ambitious could end up like this. The answer was simple. He had built his life on lies, greed, and betrayal. A week later, I ran into an old mutual acquaintance at an art event. "I saw James the other day," they said, shaking their head. "He's not doing well. I think he regrets everything." The comment stayed with me not because I cared about his regret but because it reinforced how far I had come. James's downfall was his own doing, while my success had been built on resilience and hard work. As the weeks passed, the updates about James grew less frequent. It was clear that he was no longer the man people admired or envied. He had become a cautionary tale, a reminder that actions have consequences. Clara summed it up best during one of our coffee dates. "He made his bed, Emma. Now he has to lie in it." "True," I said with a nod. "But I'm too busy enjoying my life to worry about his." James's downfall wasn't just about his financial ruin. It was a testament to the choices he had made and the values he had abandoned. It was also a stark contrast to the life I was building, one filled with love, creativity, and authenticity. Standing in my studio one evening, putting the finishing touches on a new painting, I realized how little space James occupied in my thoughts anymore. His betrayal had once defined my world, but now it was nothing more than a chapter in my story. A chapter one had closed for good. It had been over a year since James left, and my life had transformed in ways I never thought possible. My career was thriving, my confidence was unshakable, and Lucas brought a light to my life that I hadn't realized I was missing. I rarely thought about James anymore, but fate had other plans. It wasn't quite finished weaving him into my story. The encounter happened at a high-profile charity gala I had been invited to as a featured artist. My paintings had gained significant attention in the art world, and being recognized in such a prestigious setting was a dream come true. Lucas was by my side, looking dashing in his tailored suit, his quiet confidence making me feel at ease as we navigated the glittering event. The ballroom was a sea of elegant gowns and sharp tuxedos, the hum of polite conversation and the clinking of glasses filling the air. As we mingled, an older gentleman approached us, introducing himself as a potential patron. "I've heard incredible things about your work," he said, shaking my hand warmly. We were mid-conversation when I noticed a familiar figure in the distance. James. He stood near the bar, looking distinctly out of place. His once impeccable appearance had faded. His suit was slightly rumpled, and his posture lacked the confident arrogance he used to carry. He wasn't surrounded by admirers or colleagues. Instead, he stood alone, nursing a drink and scanning the room. My heart skipped a beat, not from lingering feelings but from the sheer shock of seeing him there. He hadn't noticed me yet, and for a moment I debated slipping away quietly. But then his eyes locked onto mine and his expression froze. His gaze flickered to Lucas, then back to me, a mixture of surprise and something else, regret perhaps, crossing his face. I turned back to Lucas and the patron, pretending not to notice James, but I could feel his eyes on me. A few minutes later, as Lucas stepped away to grab us drinks, James made his move. "Emma," he said, his voice hesitant and unfamiliar. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "James." He looked like a shadow of the man I had once loved. His shoulders slumped slightly, and there was a weariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, attempting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I could say the same," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He hesitated as though searching for the right words. "You look amazing," he said finally. "Thank you," I said simply, unwilling to offer him more than politeness. "I've heard about your success," he continued. "Your work is everywhere. People can't stop talking about it." "I've been fortunate," I said, glancing toward the crowd, hoping Lucas would return soon. James shifted uncomfortably. "Emma, James," I interrupted, my tone firm. "We don't need to do this. Whatever you're about to say, I don't need to hear it." He looked taken aback but quickly recovered. "I just wanted to apologize. For everything. For hurting you, for leaving. I was a fool." His words might have once broken me, but now they felt hollow. "You made your choices, James," I said calmly. "And I've moved on." He glanced at Lucas, who had just returned with our drinks. "I can see that," he said quietly. Lucas's presence was a silent reminder of how far I had come. He placed a reassuring hand on my back, his expression curious but non-confrontational. "Is everything okay?" Lucas asked, his warm hazel eyes meeting mine. Perfectly fine, I said with a small smile. James was just leaving. James's face fell, but he nodded. Take care, Emma, he said before turning and walking away. As Lucas and I continued to mingle, I couldn't help but reflect on the encounter. Seeing James again had stirred memories, but it had also confirmed something important. I was free. Free from his betrayal, free from the pain he had caused, and free to embrace the life I was creating without him. Lucas noticed my thoughtful expression and leaned in. You okay? I smiled up at him, grateful for his presence. More than okay, I said. I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Not long after the gala, I received a text message from an unknown number. At first, I considered ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. When I opened the message, my breath caught. Emma, it's James. Please, can we talk? I need to see you. I owe you an explanation. I stared at the screen for a long moment, conflicted. The last time we spoke at the gala, I had been clear. I didn't need or want anything from him. Yet here he was, reaching out, breaking the fragile silence we had maintained. Against my better judgment, I decided to respond. There's nothing left to say, James. You made your choices. His reply came almost instantly. Please, Emma. Just one conversation. That's all I'm asking. After discussing it with Clara and Lucas, I reluctantly agreed to meet him. You don't owe him anything, Clara reminded me. But if this helps you close the door for good, then do it. We met at a quiet cafe far from the crowds and noise. When I walked in, James was already there, looking more worn and defeated than I had ever seen him. His once pristine appearance had given way to dark circles under his eyes and an air of desperation. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down across from him. What do you want, James? I asked, my tone firm but not unkind. He took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting with the coffee cup in front of him. Emma, I don't even know where to begin, he said. I've made so many mistakes and I've lost everything because of them. That much is clear, I replied, keeping my expression neutral. He winced but pressed on. I left you for Victoria because I thought I wanted the life she could give me. The wealth, the connections, the status. But it was all a lie. She didn't love me. She used me, and when things got tough, she left. And now you expect me to feel sorry for you? I asked, my voice steady. No, he said quickly. I don't expect anything. I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see how badly I hurt you and how wrong I was. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Emma, and I threw it away. His words stirred something in me, but it wasn't sympathy. It was clarity. For years I had blamed myself for his betrayal, questioning my worth and wondering what I had done wrong. But now, as I sat across from him, I realized the truth. His actions had never been about me. They had been about him. His selfishness, his greed, his inability to appreciate what he had. You're right, I said finally. You did throw it away. And you can't undo that. I know, he said, his voice cracking. But I want to make it right. Please, Emma, give me another chance. I shook my head, the finality of my decision settling over me like a warm blanket. James, I've moved on. I've built a life for myself. A life I'm proud of. You don't get to come back and disrupt that because you're finally realizing what you lost. His shoulders slumped, and for a moment I thought he might cry. I understand, he said softly. I hope you can forgive me someday. Forgiveness isn't about you, I said, standing up. It's about me. And I've already forgiven you, not for your sake but for mine. So I can let go and move forward. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. James's desperate plea had been an echo of the past, a reminder of who I used to be and how far I had come. When I returned home, Lucas was waiting for me, his warm smile immediately putting me at ease. How did it go? He asked. It went exactly how it needed to, I said, wrapping my arms around him. That night, as we sat together on the couch, I reflected on how much my life had changed. James's betrayal had once been the defining moment of my existence, but now, it was nothing more than a stepping stone to the incredible life I was building. I had reclaimed my power, my happiness, and my sense of self. And I knew without a doubt that I was exactly where I was meant to be. After meeting James and hearing his desperate plea for forgiveness, I thought I'd feel conflicted. But to my surprise, I didn't. My decision to move forward with my life, free from his influence, was unwavering. The chapter with James was closed, and I was determined to leave it that way. A week later, I received another text from James. This time it was longer, filled with apologies, self-reflection, and a last-ditch effort to salvage what he thought remained between us. Emma, I know I've hurt you more than I can ever repair. I don't expect you to take me back, but I can't stop thinking about the life we had. You were my everything and I threw it away. Please, can we talk again? I stared at the message, emotions swirling in my chest. It wasn't anger or sadness, it was pity. Pity for the man who had once been my husband but had lost himself chasing a life that had only brought him emptiness. I typed a simple reply, there's nothing left to discuss. I wish you well but I've moved on. That same evening Lucas and I attended a gallery event where I was being honored as a featured artist. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement and the room was filled with admirers of my work. As I mingled with the guests, Lucas stayed close, offering quiet support and beaming with pride every time someone complimented my art. You're the star of the night, he said, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I couldn't have done this without you, I replied, squeezing his hand. You've always had it in you, he said. I just reminded you of what you're capable of. The highlight of the evening came when the gallery's curator approached me with a proposal for a solo exhibition. Something I had dreamed of but never imagined would happen so soon. We believe your work deserves its own spotlight, she said. Your pieces resonate with people in a way that's rare and powerful. Overwhelmed with gratitude, I accepted the offer, realizing that this opportunity was more than just a career milestone. It was a testament to how far I had come, a reflection of the resilience and strength I had discovered within myself. As I stood in the center of the gallery, surrounded by my paintings and the people who believed in me, I felt a sense of triumph that no one could take away. The pain of James's betrayal had once threatened to consume me, but now, it was nothing more than a distant memory, a stepping stone to the life I was building. Later that night, Lucas and I walked hand in hand through the quiet streets, the cool breeze carrying the scent of blooming flowers. You seem so at peace tonight, he said, his voice soft. I am, I replied, looking up at the stars. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Lucas stopped walking and turned to face me. Emma, I need to tell you something, he said, his expression serious yet tender. What is it? I asked, my heart fluttering. I've fallen in love with you, he said, his voice steady. Not because of what you've been through but because of who you are, strong, compassionate and endlessly inspiring. Tears filled my eyes as his words sank in. Lucas, I've fallen in love with you too, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. In that moment, under the starlit sky, I realized that I had found something far more valuable than what I had lost. I had found love, not rooted in betrayal or obligation, but in mutual respect, trust, and admiration. The decision to leave James in the past wasn't just about rejecting his pleas for forgiveness. It was about embracing the life I had built without him. A life filled with love, creativity, and the promise of a future unburdened by the pain of the past. As the weeks turned into months, my life blossomed in ways I never thought possible. The solo exhibition was a resounding success, solidifying my place in the art world and opening doors I hadn't even known existed. Invitations to collaborate with international artists and offers to showcase my work in renowned galleries poured in. But it wasn't just about the accolades or the opportunities. It was about the sense of purpose and fulfillment that came with creating something meaningful. My art had become a reflection of my journey, a testament to the strength I had found in adversity. Lucas remained by my side through it all, his unwavering support a constant source of comfort. Our relationship deepened, built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect. He wasn't just my partner, he was my confidant, my biggest cheerleader, and the person who reminded me every day of my worth. One evening, after a long day of work, we sat together in my studio, surrounded by unfinished canvases and the faint scent of paint. You've come so far, Emma, Lucas said, his voice filled with pride. Watching you grow into this incredible, unstoppable force has been amazing. I smiled, leaning into him. I couldn't have done it without you. That's not true, he replied, gently tilting my chin to meet his gaze. You've always had this strength. I just helped you see it. Despite the happiness I had found, there were occasional reminders of the past. Mutual acquaintances would sometimes bring up James, mentioning his continued struggles or the fallout from his failed business ventures. One day Claire shared an update over coffee. You'll never guess what I heard about James, she said, her tone laced with curiosity. What now? I asked, more amused than concerned. He's moved out of the city, she said. Apparently he couldn't handle facing everyone after everything that happened. I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. I hope he finds peace, I said simply, surprising even myself with the sincerity of my words. The truth was, James's story no longer held power over me. His betrayal had once consumed me, but now it felt like a distant memory, one that had shaped me but no longer defined me. Instead, my focus was on the life I was building. I had found a community of like-minded artists, mentors who challenged me to push my boundaries, and students who reminded me of the joy and freedom that creativity could bring. One day, while teaching a workshop at a local community center, a young girl approached me with a shy smile. "Miss Emma, I love your paintings," she said, holding up a small sketchpad. Her enthusiasm brought a lump to my throat. "Thank you," I said, crouching down to meet her eye level. "Do you like to paint too?" She nodded eagerly, flipping through her sketchpad to show me her work. Her drawings were simple but full of heart, and I could see the spark of creativity in her eyes. "Keep practicing," I said, handing her a spare paintbrush from my bag. "You have so much talent. Never stop believing in yourself." Her face lit up, and in that moment, I saw a reflection of myself. A girl who had once doubted her worth but had found strength in creating. That evening, as Lucas and I sat on the balcony of our apartment, watching the city lights twinkle below, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. "Do you ever think about how far you've come?" he asked, his voice soft. "All the time," I said, leaning against him. "It's hard to believe that this is my life now. That I made it here." "You didn't just make it," he said, kissing the top of my head. "You rebuilt yourself from the ground up. You turned something broken into something extraordinary." Lucas's words stayed with me as I prepared for my next big project. A series of paintings exploring themes of resilience, transformation, and hope. Each stroke of the brush felt like a celebration of the journey I had been on, a tribute to the strength I had found within myself. James and his betrayal were no longer the center of my story. They were a footnote, a reminder of where I had been but not where I was headed. I had reclaimed my life, my happiness, and my sense of self. And with Lucas by my side, I knew the future was filled with endless possibilities. The night of my solo exhibition arrived, a culmination of years of pain, growth, and triumph. The gallery was abuzz with excitement, filled with patrons, critics, and admirers who had come to celebrate my work. The series, titled Resilience, A Journey Through Betrayal and Renewal, was deeply personal, a reflection of everything I had endured and overcome. As I stood near the entrance greeting guests, I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. This was more than an art show. It was a testament to my journey. The woman who had once been broken by betrayal was now standing tall, her story transformed into something beautiful and inspiring. Lucas, as always, was by my side, his presence a comforting anchor in the whirlwind of the evening. "Look around, Emma," he said, gesturing to the bustling gallery. "This is all because of you." I smiled, squeezing his hand. "Because of us," I corrected. Clara joined us moments later, holding a glass of champagne and beaming with pride. "Emma, this is incredible," she said. "You've created something truly unforgettable." Her words echoed the sentiment of the evening. Guests approached me with kind words and questions about the stories behind the paintings. Each conversation reminded me of the power of art to connect, to heal, and to inspire. Midway through the event, the gallery's curator called for everyone's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "Tonight we celebrate not just an artist, but a journey of resilience and transformation. Emma's work speaks to the strength of the human spirit, and we are honored to showcase it here." The applause that followed was thunderous, and as I stepped forward to thank everyone, I felt a lump in my throat. "Thank you," I began, my voice steady despite the emotion welling up inside me. "This series represents the most challenging and transformative period of my life. It's a story of pain, yes, but also of growth, healing, and hope. I'm grateful to each of you for being here to share it with me." As the evening wore on, I noticed James standing in the back corner of the room, partially hidden behind a group of guests. My heart didn't skip a beat. It didn't clench with anger or ache with sadness. That I felt nothing. He caught my eye and offered a small, tentative wave, but I simply nodded in acknowledgement before turning back to my conversation. This was my night, my moment, and I wouldn't let him take any part of it. Later, as Lucas and I walked home under the glow of the city lights, he broke the comfortable silence. "You handled seeing him tonight with such grace," he said. I shrugged. "He's just a part of my past now, a lesson I've already learned." Lucas stopped walking and turned to face me. "Emma, you amaze me every single day. Watching you grow into this incredible, unstoppable force has been the greatest privilege of my life." Tears filled my eyes as I smiled up at him. "You've been my greatest gift, Lucas. Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." As we reached our apartment, I looked out at the city skyline, the twinkling lights a reminder of how far I had come. My life was no longer defined by betrayal or pain. It was defined by the choices I had made, the strength I had discovered, and the love I had found. I thought about James and Victoria, their betrayal a catalyst for the life I was now living. I didn't hate them anymore. In fact, I felt gratitude. Their actions had forced me to confront my fears, to rebuild my life, and to become the person I was always meant to be. The next morning, I returned to my studio ready to begin a new project. The blank canvas in front of me felt like a symbol of my future, full of possibilities, waiting for me to create something extraordinary. As I picked up my brush, Lucas walked in with 2 cups of coffee, setting one down beside me. "What's next for the great Emma?" he teased, his smile warm and teasing. "Anything I want," I replied confidently, dipping my brush into the paint. And for the first time in a long time, I knew it was true. My story wasn't about James anymore. It wasn't about betrayal or heartbreak. It was about me, my resilience, my strength, and my ability to rise above everything life had thrown my way. It was my story, and I was finally the one writing it.